Damon Price was 42 years old, and until that Thursday afternoon in Atlanta, he believed his wife of 11 years was visiting her mother in Savannah. He was a structural engineer, a man who built things designed to last, who trusted what the blueprints told him. He had never once questioned Lydia's annual August trip. Not once in 11 years. But something had shifted when she came home that summer. Small things, wrong things, the kind of hairline fractures that only an engineer notices. So Damon booked a flight. He parked across from a Buckhead restaurant and he waited. And then he watched his wife walk through that door in a dress he had never seen, laughing before she even reached the entrance, and greet another man the way you greet someone who knows every part of you. He sat in that car with his camera, and his silence, and 4 months of quiet suspicion that had just become something else entirely. What Lydia didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the man she had underestimated for 11 years had just started taking notes. And what he was about to uncover went far deeper than one man in one restaurant. What Damon did next would cost her everything she thought she'd already secured. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The numbers on the page blurred as Damon Price squinted at his calculations in the pre-dawn darkness. The kitchen's overhead light cast a warm glow across his work materials, blueprints, engineering specs, and a half-empty coffee mug that had gone cold hours ago. It was 5:47 a.m., and like every other morning, he was the first one awake. He adjusted his reading glasses and double-checked the load-bearing figures for the new office complex his firm was designing. Numbers had always made sense to him. They were reliable, consistent. If the math was solid, the structure would hold. It was that simple. The house around him was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. This was his favorite time of day, before the world fully woke up. The morning light was just beginning to creep through the kitchen windows he had specifically positioned to catch the sunrise when he designed this house 11 years ago. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the exposed wooden beams to the open floor plan that made Lydia's dinner parties flow so smoothly. Footsteps padded down the hallway, and Lydia appeared in her silk robe, perfectly put together even at this early hour. Her dark hair was already styled, makeup flawless. She had always been like that, polished, prepared, ready to command any room she walked into. "You're up early," she said, pressing a kiss to his temple as she passed. "Again." Just reviewing the Madison Street calculations. He watched as she moved efficiently through their kitchen, brewing her morning tea with practiced grace. "You always check everything twice," she said, but her tone was fond. This was their routine. Him with his numbers, her with her social calendar and event planning business. They had built a good life together, even if it wasn't exactly the one they'd imagined. The nursery upstairs was still empty, converted to a home office 3 years ago when they stopped trying. They didn't talk about it anymore. Some griefs were better left in comfortable silence. "The August trip is next week," Lydia mentioned, settling across from him with her tea. "I should start packing soon." Damon nodded. The annual pilgrimage to Savannah. 12 days every August when Lydia flew down to visit her mother and sisters. She'd been doing it since their 2nd year of marriage. He'd never minded. He used the time to visit his father in Greensboro, catch up on projects, breathe a little. "Tell your mom I said hello," he said, like he always did. "Of course." She smiled, but something flickered in her expression. So brief he almost missed it. The trip itself went as expected. The shift came after she returned. Small things, barely noticeable if you weren't paying attention. But Damon had spent his career noticing small things, hairline cracks that could compromise entire structures. He noticed how she tilted her phone away when texting, laughing at messages she wouldn't share. How she slept facing the wall 3 nights in a row, something she'd never done before. But it was the conversation about Brenda's kitchen renovation that truly caught his attention. The marble countertops really open up the space, Lydia had said over dinner one evening, describing her sister's new kitchen in detail. A week later, when Damon casually mentioned the marble to make conversation, Lydia blinked. Oh, no, Brenda went with granite. Much more practical with the kids. He watched her recover smoothly, launching into a different story about her sister's family. But the discrepancy lodged in his mind like a mathematical error that wouldn't balance out. That night, Damon sat at his desk in the home office, the computer screen dark in front of him. He wasn't working. He was thinking about load-bearing walls and structural integrity, about how buildings didn't just collapse. They showed warning signs first, if you knew where to look. His hands were steady as he opened his laptop. The soft blue light illuminated his face as he stared at the screen, mind already mapping out the steps ahead. He was an engineer. He didn't work on hunches or emotions. He worked on verified data and confirmed facts. The cursor blinked, waiting for his next move. Down the hall, he could hear Lydia on the phone, her laugh carrying through the walls of their carefully designed home. He began to type. 3 weeks after Lydia's return, Damon sat in his home office late one evening, staring at the login screen for their shared family email account. They had set it up years ago for household matters, utility bills, tax documents, subscription services. His cursor hovered over the password field. In 11 years of marriage, he had never felt the need to check anything. Trust wasn't just a choice for him. It had been his default setting, as natural as breathing. But now his engineer's mind couldn't ignore the inconsistencies, the small cracks in their foundation that demanded investigation. He typed in the password. The inbox loaded, filled with the mundane digital paper trail of their shared life together. He clicked the search bar and typed, Lydia Price. His fingers moved with the same precision he used when reviewing structural calculations, methodical and exact. The results populated his screen. Among the expected confirmations for online purchases and newsletter subscriptions, one email stood out. A hotel booking confirmation from 3 weeks ago. He opened it. The Loews Hotel, Atlanta. Guest, Lydia Price. Duration, 5 nights. Dates, matching her supposed Savannah trip. Damon leaned back in his chair, letting the information settle. Not Savannah. Atlanta. The distance between truth and story stretched out like a fault line. He reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Miss Hargrove's number. The kitchen clock read 8:17 p.m. Not too late for a call to his mother-in-law. He had always liked Lydia's mother, appreciated her warm, straightforward nature. The phone rang twice before she answered. Hello? Miss Hargrove, it's Damon, he said, keeping his voice casual, friendly. Sorry to call so late. Never too late to hear from my favorite son-in-law, she replied with the easy affection he'd come to expect from her. I wanted to mail you a birthday card, he said, the pretense feeling heavy in his mouth. Just wanted to confirm your address. You're still on Magnolia Drive, right? They chatted about her address, about the weather, about her garden. Then Damon carefully steered the conversation where he needed it to go. You know, I was just thinking about Lydia's visits. I know how much they mean to you. Oh? Miss Hargrove's voice lifted with interest. How long does she usually stay when she's there? The question felt like setting a level against a wall, checking for true. There was a pause on the line. Baby, Lydia hasn't been down here in almost 2 years. We keep trying to get her to come, but you know how busy she stays with that event planning business? 2 years. The words hit him like a mathematical error that changed everything about the equation. 2 years of stories. 2 years of fabricated details about family dinners that never happened. Conversations that never took place. Right, of course, he said, his voice maintaining its steady rhythm. Well, I should let you go. Thanks for confirming the address. Any time, sweetheart. Tell my girl to call her mama. He ended the call and sat in the quiet of his office, looking at the hotel confirmation still open on his screen. The truth had a weight to it, pressing against his chest. 20 minutes later, he was sitting in his car in the office parking garage. He had driven there without conscious thought, needing neutral ground to process what he'd learned. The concrete walls around him felt solid, dependable. He checked his watch. 22 minutes had passed since he'd parked. He hadn't moved once. His phone showed a text from Lydia. "Working late?" Looking at her name on the screen, Damon made his decision. He wouldn't confront her with a hotel receipt and watch her construct explanations he couldn't disprove. He wouldn't give her the chance to patch over these cracks with more stories. Next August, he would go to Atlanta himself. He would see what she had built there with his own eyes. When he arrived home, he moved through their kitchen with deliberate calm, starting dinner preparation. Lydia was at her laptop in the dining room, surrounded by event planning documents. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice carrying the same warmth it always had. "Busy," she said, looking up with a smile. "The Henderson wedding is turning into a circus. The mother of the bride wants to change the entire color scheme 6 weeks before the ceremony." He listened to her talk about her day, about the clients and the complications, about all the small details that made up her version of their life. Each word settled into the space between them like another piece of evidence. In his mind, he made a promise. She would have to say the truth herself, or he would go take it. August arrived with the heavy heat that marked Carolina summers. Tuesday morning dawned clear and bright as Damon watched Lydia pack her rolling carry-on with practiced efficiency. She moved through their bedroom with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had performed this ritual many times before. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you to the airport?" Damon asked, leaning against the door frame. "No need," Lydia said, zipping her bag closed. "I've got my spot reserved in long-term parking. You know how I like my routine." She crossed the room and pressed a kiss to his cheek, her perfume lingering in the air between them. "I'll text when I land in Savannah." He nodded, watching her walk down their front path to her car. She waved before pulling away, and he lifted his hand in response. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, he went to his home office and opened his laptop. Wednesday morning, Damon called in a personal day at work, his first in over 8 months. He had already booked his flight to Atlanta under his own name, chosen a hotel different from hers, arranged everything with the same attention to detail he brought to his engineering projects. The itinerary note he'd found in Lydia's email drafts listed several locations and times, including a lunch meeting at an upscale restaurant in Buckhead scheduled for Thursday afternoon. He memorized the address, though he'd already looked up the location multiple times, studying the street view, identifying optimal observation points. Thursday afternoon found him parked in a rental car across from the restaurant, positioned where he could see both the entrance and the street-side tables through the large windows. The air conditioning hummed quietly as he waited, his hands steady on the steering wheel. At 12:47, Lydia appeared, walking down the sidewalk with the confident stride he knew so well. She wore a navy blue dress he had never seen before, fitted, professional, clearly chosen with care. Her laughter carried across the street as she approached the restaurant entrance, though he couldn't see who had sent the message that made her smile at her phone that way. Then Warren Cole stepped out of the restaurant to meet her. Damon recognized him from the corporate headshot he'd found online. Tall, well-dressed in a light gray suit that spoke of careful tailoring. Cole moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms and closing deals. What happened next wasn't quick or ambiguous. Cole's hand found the small of Lydia's back with practiced familiarity, settling there like it belonged. When he leaned in to kiss her, it wasn't a greeting between friends or even a tentative gesture. It was the kiss of a man who had done this countless times before, who knew exactly how she would respond. Damon lifted his phone and began taking photographs, not in anger, though the emotion was there, buried deep beneath layers of focused observation. But with the same methodical precision he brought to documenting structural defects. He needed evidence. He needed confirmation. 4 minutes of documentation gave him both. The drive back to his hotel passed in a blur of Atlanta traffic and afternoon sun. He ordered room service, a club sandwich and fries that sat untouched on the desk, while darkness crept into the room. He didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd witnessed. 11 years. Countless moments of shared life. Morning coffees, evening walks, holiday celebrations, quiet Sundays, all of it overlaid now with the knowledge that she had built a parallel existence. Every business trip, every girls' weekend, every family visit suddenly required re-examination. How many of them had been real? He gave himself exactly 1 night to process the anger, the hurt, the humiliation. 1 night to let the emotions wash through him without resistance. Because tomorrow required strategy, and strategy demanded clarity. Friday morning, before his flight home, he pulled up property records on his phone while sitting in the rental car. The LLC name he'd found connected to Warren Cole led him to a midtown Atlanta address. The modern high-rise stood gleaming in the morning sun as he drove past, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the sky. County records told the rest of the story. The condo was jointly owned by the LLC, and the LLC had 2 managing members, Warren Cole and Lydia Price. His wife owned property with another man. She hadn't just found companionship in Atlanta. She had invested in a life there, built a foundation separate from everything they shared. 4 days later, Damon stood at the airport arrivals area, watching Lydia walk toward him with her rolling carry-on. She smiled when she saw him, quickening her pace to meet him with a hug. Her perfume was the same one she'd worn when she left, but now he wondered if she wore different scents in Atlanta. "Welcome home," he said, taking her bag and placing it in the trunk of their car. She chatted about her supposed visit to Savannah as they pulled away from the airport, and he responded in all the right places, with all the right words. She believed she was coming home to the man she'd left, the patient, trusting husband who fixed things and asked few questions. She was wrong. The next morning, Damon woke at 5:45 a.m., just as he always did. Sunlight hadn't yet reached their bedroom windows as he slipped quietly from beneath the covers, careful not to wake Lydia. In the kitchen, he went through his familiar routine, grinding coffee beans, measuring the grounds, filling the water reservoir. The coffee maker's gentle burble provided background noise as he leaned against the counter, staring at nothing in particular. When Lydia came downstairs at 7:15, her coffee was waiting in her favorite cream-colored mug, fixed exactly how she liked it. Splash of almond milk, no sugar. She smiled at him over the rim as she took her first sip. "You're the best," she said, and he wondered if she said similar things to Warren Cole over morning coffee in Atlanta. "Just keeping to routine," he replied, his voice steady and warm. The following week moved forward like any other. Damon attended his meetings, reviewed structural plans, answered emails, and maintained every pattern of their shared life with mechanical precision. Each calculated normal moment was a piece of scaffolding, supporting the structure he needed to build before making his first real move. On Thursday, he closed his office door at 3:45 p.m. and called Audra Banks. They'd worked together for 6 years, and she was the most discreet person he knew. She answered on the second ring. "Can you meet me at Carson's after work?" he asked. "I need to talk about something important." "Of course," she said. No questions asked. That was Audra. Direct, efficient, reliable. Carson's was a quiet bar 3 blocks from their office, the kind of place where happy hour meant actually being able to hear the person across from you. Damon waited at a corner table, watching Audra navigate through the after-work crowd with her characteristic purposeful stride. She sat down, ordered a club soda, and looked at him expectantly. "What's going on?" Damon told her everything. The Atlanta trip, Warren Cole, the condo, all of it. Audra listened without interruption, her expression changing only slightly as the story unfolded. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, then said exactly what he needed to hear. "What do you need?" "I need a forensic accountant," he said. "Someone who can look at our finances without raising flags. Someone thorough and discreet." Audra nodded once. "Patricia Osei. She's handled cases for some of our corporate clients. I'll send you her contact information tonight." The next morning, Damon had an appointment with Patricia Osei, whose office proved to be as precise and organized as she was. She asked clear questions, took detailed notes, and explained exactly what she would need from him to conduct a comprehensive review. "I'll need access to all joint accounts, tax returns for the past 5 years, property records, investment statements," Patricia said, her fingers moving efficiently across her keyboard. "The more complete the picture, the more likely we are to identify any concerning patterns." Damon provided everything she requested. For 2 weeks, he continued his normal routine, while Patricia worked through years of financial records. He made dinner, attended a neighborhood cookout with Lydia, and reviewed plans for a new office complex downtown. If Lydia noticed anything different about him, she gave no indication. When Patricia called him back to her office, she had prepared a detailed report. She laid out spreadsheets and bank statements on her desk with methodical precision. "Over the past 4 years," she explained, "there's been a pattern of transfers from your joint savings account to a separate account at First Regional Bank." She pointed to highlighted transactions. "The amounts vary. $267 here, $543 there, $891 another time. Never the same amount twice, never large enough to trigger attention in any given month." Damon leaned forward, studying the numbers. "Total amount?" $74,000, Patricia said quietly. "The account is in Lydia's name only. The pattern suggests deliberate accumulation, an exit strategy." Damon sat perfectly still, absorbing this new reality. His wife hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been methodically preparing to leave him, building her escape fund one careful transfer at a time. The precision of it was almost admirable, in a horrible way. "Document everything," he said finally, his voice level. "I need copies of all transactions, account details, the full pattern." Patricia nodded. "I'll have the complete report ready by tomorrow afternoon." That evening, Damon stood in their kitchen, carefully coating chicken pieces in seasoned flour, while rice simmered on the back burner. The familiar motions of cooking helped steady his hands, measuring spices, layering flavors, building Lydia's favorite meal step by step. When she came home, the house smelled of smothered chicken and memories of countless other dinners just like this one. She came up behind him as he stirred the gravy, wrapping her arms around his waist. "It smells amazing," she said. They ate at their kitchen table, just as they always did. Lydia took her first bite and smiled broadly. "Perfect," she said. "You always make it perfectly." "I'm glad," Damon replied, and took another bite of dinner. The familiar 2-lane highway to Greensboro stretched before Damon like a meditation. Fields and farmland rolled past his window, the late morning sun casting long shadows across freshly harvested cornfields. He'd driven this route to his father's house hundreds of times over the years, usually with Lydia beside him. Today, he drove alone. Jerome Price's house sat back from the road, a well-maintained ranch-style home with neat flower beds and a covered front porch, where the mail carrier had delivered letters for 3 decades before becoming the homeowner. As Damon pulled into the gravel driveway, he saw his father already on that porch, seated in his usual wooden rocker, as if he'd been waiting. "You're early," Jerome said as Damon climbed the porch steps. It wasn't a criticism, just an observation from a man who had spent 30 years memorizing the precise timing of everything. "Traffic was light," Damon replied, settling into the second rocker. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a cardinal flit between the bird feeders Jerome maintained with the same attention to detail he'd once given his postal route. "You didn't bring Lydia," Jerome finally said. Again, not a question, just marking the deviation from pattern. "No." Damon turned to face his father directly. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen first." Jerome nodded once, folding his weathered hands in his lap. He had the patient stillness of a man who had walked miles through rain and heat, learning to read streets, houses, and the people who lived in them. Nothing rushed Jerome Price. Damon started with Atlanta, the hotel confirmation, the restaurant, Warren Cole. He described the condo property records, then moved to Patricia's findings about the $74,000 in diverted funds. Throughout it all, Jerome remained motionless, his expression unchanging except for a slight tightening around his eyes. When Damon finished, Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked simply, "What's your plan?" Damon outlined it: the legal preparation, the documentation, the timing. Jerome listened with the same careful attention he'd given the first part of the story. When Damon finished, his father's face had taken on a different kind of weight. "I need to tell you something," Jerome said slowly. "Something I should have told you 11 years ago." He shifted in his rocker, the wood creaking softly beneath him. "About 2 years before you and Lydia got married, she came to see me. Here, on this porch. You were at work." Damon felt something cold settle in his stomach. What did she want? "Information." Jerome's voice was carefully neutral. "She said she loved you, but she needed to know about money, not your salary. She knew that. She wanted to know about inheritance, specifically this land, the family land, 31 acres of Guilford County, that had been in the Price family since Jerome's father bought it in 1962. Land that had weathered economic ups and downs, development pressures, and multiple offers to sell. She asked if you would inherit it? Damon's voice was very quiet. Jerome nodded. She wanted to know its value, its status, whether it would come to you directly or through some other arrangement. He paused. I told her it was complicated family property, and left it at that. I didn't tell her specifics, but I didn't tell you about the conversation either. Why not? Damon asked, though he thought he knew. Because you were happy, Jerome said simply. Because I told myself maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a young woman being practical about her future. He shook his head slowly. I've carried that decision for 11 years. They sat with that for a while, watching the cardinal return to the feeder. The land in question stretched out behind the house, not visible from the porch, but present in every conversation they'd ever had about family legacy. That land's worth about $1.3 million now, Jerome said finally. With the new development pushing this way, probably more in a few years. Damon absorbed this, not just the number, but what it meant about Lydia's long game. She hadn't just married him for stability. She'd assessed him like a financial prospectus before she ever said, I love you. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jerome reached over and put his hand on Damon's shoulder, a gesture that contained 11 years of unspoken concern, current support, and shared understanding. Call Marcus first thing Monday, Damon said, referring to the family's longtime attorney. We need to clarify the trust structure before any divorce filing. Make it absolutely clear this land stays in the Price family trust. Jerome's hand tightened briefly on his shoulder. No speech was needed. They sat together as darkness gathered. Two men who understood exactly what needed to be done. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything feel more defined. Damon sat in the waiting room of Philip Okafor's law office, a leather portfolio containing months of careful documentation resting on his lap. The office itself spoke of precise competence, clean lines, modern furniture, and absolutely nothing decorative that wasn't functional. Philip Okafor emerged from his office exactly on time, extending a firm handshake. "Mr. Price, please come in." He was younger than Damon had expected, maybe mid-30s, but carried himself with the contained energy of someone who knew exactly how to navigate complex situations. Inside the office, Damon laid out the documents in sequence. The hotel records came first, confirmation emails, dates, times. Then, the Atlanta property deed showing Lydia's co-ownership with Warren Cole. Patricia's detailed financial analysis followed, laying bare the pattern of diverted funds, $74,000 extracted from their marriage, in careful increments over 4 years. "The financial diversion is particularly significant," Philip said, studying Patricia's report. "This constitutes clear marital asset dissipation. She systematically removed funds from joint accounts without disclosure or agreement. That substantially strengthens your position." Damon nodded. "There's more." He described Jerome's account of Lydia's premarital inquiry about the family land. As he spoke, he watched Philip's expression shift subtly. "The timing of this is critical," Philip said, leaning forward. "If she files first, she could attempt to claim the Guilford County property as a marital asset. Has your father started the trust restructuring?" "His attorney began the paperwork this morning." "Good. If that completes before any filing, the land should be protected." Philip made several notes. "We'll need Jerome's sworn statement about that conversation, but the pattern it establishes is compelling, especially combined with the documented financial behavior." While Philip reviewed the documents, Damon's phone buzzed with a message from Audra. He opened it to find a detailed profile on Warren Cole, compiled through public records and professional networks. The picture it painted was illuminating. Cole was a mid-level real estate developer with moderate success, but no particular distinction. His firm handled mid-sized commercial projects, nothing spectacular. But the crucial detail wasn't professional. It was personal. Warren Cole was married to Dana Cole, a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. They had 2 children, ages 8 and 11. Based on Dana's social media presence, which Audra had carefully reviewed, she had no idea her husband co-owned property with another woman. Audra's message contained one more critical piece of information. The Atlanta condo Lydia co-owned with Warren had been listed for sale 6 weeks ago, right around the time Lydia was last in Atlanta. She wasn't just planning to leave Damon. She was liquidating her parallel life. She had a timeline in mind. "Mr. Price?" Philip's voice brought Damon back to the present. "Are you ready to proceed with retaining my services?" Damon looked at the retainer agreement Philip had placed before him. The terms were clear, the strategy outlined. Everything Patricia had promised about Philip's precision was evident in the document. "Yes," Damon said, reaching for the pen. He signed his name with the same steady hand he used for engineering calculations. No hesitation, no flourish. Philip gathered the documents efficiently. "I'll begin preparing the filing immediately. We'll want everything ready to move quickly when the moment comes." "Understood." Damon stood, shaking Philip's hand again. "Thank you for your time." The drive home felt surreal in its normalcy. The same traffic patterns, the same route he'd driven countless times. He arrived to find Lydia already home, curled up on the couch with a book. "Hey," she smiled up at him. "Long day?" "The usual," he replied, settling into his usual spot on the couch. She turned on the television, finding some home renovation show they often watched together. They sat in what appeared to be comfortable silence, the familiar rhythm of their evening routine playing out like any other Monday. Damon felt completely calm. The documentation was in place. The legal framework was being constructed. Jerome's attorney was already moving to protect the family land. Everything was proceeding exactly as it needed to. On screen, a couple argued about kitchen countertops. Beside him, Lydia made a small comment about the tile choice. Damon responded appropriately, his voice carrying no trace of the morning's meetings or the weight of what he now knew. They sat together in the soft lamplight, two people watching television, saying nothing of significance. One of them believing everything was proceeding according to plan, the other knowing exactly whose plan would actually unfold. The November morning arrived with a gentle chill as Damon stood at the kitchen counter, preparing coffee. Lydia entered, already dressed for work, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. "I've been thinking," she said, accepting the mug he offered. "I'd like to visit Caroline in Raleigh this weekend. It's been ages since I've seen her." Damon stirred cream into his own coffee. "Caroline from the event planning conference?" "Yes, exactly." Lydia's smile was easy, comfortable. "Just a quick weekend trip. I'll leave Friday after work and be back Sunday evening." He nodded, taking a sip. "Sounds nice. Tell her hello for me." Within an hour of Lydia leaving for work, Damon's phone buzzed with a message from Audra. Through her access to a shared cloud device that Lydia occasionally used for travel bookings, access Lydia had forgotten existed, Audra had found something interesting, a confirmed flight reservation for that weekend. Not to Raleigh, but to Atlanta. Damon read the flight details twice, his expression unchanged. The booking was classic Lydia, confident enough in his passivity to not even use a different device. Why should she? He had never checked before. He went about his workday as usual, reviewing structural plans for a new office complex, attending 2 client meetings, and having lunch with a contractor. The rhythm of normal life continued its steady beat, while beneath it, pieces moved silently into place. Monday morning brought something unexpected. Damon had stopped by the house during lunch to pick up some documents he'd left in his home office. As he passed through the kitchen, the landline phone's message light blinked, a number they rarely used anymore, kept mainly for emergency contacts and services. He pressed play, expecting perhaps a telemarketer or automated message. Instead, a crisp professional voice emerged. "Good morning, Mrs. Price. This is Amanda calling from Davidson and Wheeler Law Offices to confirm your consultation appointment for Thursday at 2 p.m. with Sarah Wheeler. If you need to reschedule, please call us back at—" Damon let the message play out completely. Then he played it again, his engineer's mind cataloging every detail. Davidson and Wheeler was a prominent family law firm. A consultation appointment. Thursday. She was moving. She planned to file first, to shape the narrative before he ever saw it coming. In her mind, she was still several steps ahead. Damon stepped into his car and called Philip Okafor. "She's meeting with divorce attorneys on Thursday," he said without preamble when Philip answered. "We can file today," Philip replied immediately. "Everything's prepared. We just need your final signature." "Not yet." Damon's voice remained steady. "I need 1 more week. There's something specific that has to happen first." After hanging up with Philip, Damon made another call, this one to Lydia's sister Brenda. He had always appreciated Brenda's direct nature, her quiet perceptiveness that reminded him somewhat of Audra. "Brenda? It's Damon. I need to ask you something important." "Go ahead," she said, her tone already alert to his unusual call. "I need you to come to Charlotte next weekend. There's something you need to hear, something involving your sister. I need you there as a witness." There was a brief silence on the line. Then, "You found something." "Yes. I'll be there Saturday morning," Brenda said without hesitation. "I've been waiting for this call for longer than you know." His final call was to Jerome. His father answered on the first ring. "Son? It's time," Damon said simply. "Next Saturday." "Already on my way," Jerome replied. "Been keeping a bag in the car since we talked." That evening, Lydia returned from Atlanta, her weekend bag rolling behind her. She greeted him with a warm smile and a light kiss on the cheek. "Caroline says hello," she said, settling onto the couch. "We had the most wonderful brunch at this new place in downtown Raleigh. Amazing eggs Benedict." Damon sat beside her, his face a perfect mask of interest. "Sounds nice," he said, and meant none of it. Everything was in place. Saturday morning arrived with a clarity that seemed almost deliberate. At precisely 9 o'clock, Jerome's truck pulled into the driveway. He entered without fanfare, nodding once to Damon before taking his seat in the living room armchair, the one that had been his whenever he visited, a small constant in a house about to shift forever. The next 45 minutes passed in measured silence. Damon checked his watch twice, not from anxiety, but from the same precise attention he brought to every blueprint review. At 9:45, Brenda's car appeared. She walked to the front door with purpose, her shoulders set in a way that suggested she had rehearsed this moment during her 5-hour drive. Lydia came downstairs at 10, dressed casually but well, the way she always dressed for family gatherings. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw the arrangement. 3 people seated in the living room, no food visible, no celebration apparent, just waiting. "What's going on?" she asked, her social grace already calculating possibilities, adjusting her approach. "Sit down, please," Damon said quietly. His voice carried no anger, no tremor, just certainty. Lydia took the remaining chair, her eyes moving between the 3 faces. Jerome's steady gaze, Brenda's controlled tension, Damon's absolute calm. "I want to have a conversation with you," Damon began, maintaining the same measured tone. "I asked your sister and my father to be here because I think you'll want witnesses to confirm what I'm about to say is true, and I want witnesses to confirm what you say in response." He reached for a folder on the coffee table. Organized, labeled, everything in its place. The engineer's precision extending to this moment, too. "In August, I went to Atlanta," he said, watching her face register the words. "I saw you at a restaurant in Buckhead. I saw Warren Cole meet you at the door. I saw how he touched you, how he kissed you. I took photographs." He slid the first set of prints across the table. Clear, unambiguous images. Lydia's hand moved toward them but stopped halfway. "Damon," she began, her voice finding its familiar persuasive rhythm. "Yes, Warren and I have been close for a long time. It's complicated. We can get counseling." "There's more," Damon said, his calm unbroken. He withdrew another document from the folder. Patricia's financial report, detailed and devastating. "Over 4 years, you moved $74,000 from our joint savings into a private account. Small amounts, different numbers each time. Never enough to notice month to month." Lydia's face changed. The practiced composure slipped just slightly, like a foundation developing its first crack. The condo deed came next, sliding across the coffee table's polished surface. "Your name, Warren's name, property purchased 18 months ago. $22,000 of the down payment came from that same diverted account. Our money, Lydia. Our marriage's money. Used to build your other life." The room held its silence. Even the usual morning sounds, birds, distant traffic, seemed muted, as if the house itself was listening. "My attorney filed divorce papers yesterday," Damon continued, each word precise and clear. "The family land has already been moved into a protected trust structure. Any claim you might try to make on it will fail. And yes, I know about your consultation at Davidson and Wheeler on Thursday. I know you had a plan. I'm telling you that every piece of it is already accounted for." Brenda, who had been perfectly still throughout Damon's presentation, finally spoke. Her voice carried the weight of years of suspicion finally confirmed. "How long?" Lydia turned to her sister, perhaps seeking some fragment of alliance. She found none. Her silence was the only answer she gave. Brenda stood, car keys already in hand. "I drove 5 hours for you," she said quietly. Without another word, she walked to the guest room, leaving her sister to face what she had built. The sound of Lydia's heels on the stairs a few minutes later marked her retreat to the bedroom. The living room held its peace, father and son, settled in the aftermath of necessary truth. Jerome looked at his son, his expression carrying decades of quiet pride. "You handled that like a man." 4 words that said everything that needed saying. The legal process unfolded with the same measured precision that had marked everything in Damon's life. Each morning he walked into Philip Okafor's office, wearing the same calm expression, carrying folders organized by date and purpose. The engineer's mind at work, even in dissolution. "The dissipation finding is substantial," Philip explained during their first formal meeting. $74,000 over 4 years, with clear documentation of $22,000 being used for the Atlanta property. "It significantly alters the settlement dynamic." Damon nodded, his hands folded on the conference room table. "I don't want revenge. I want clarity." The negotiations proceeded along those lines. Lydia retained her personal accounts, the ones Damon hadn't known about until Patricia's investigation. She kept her car, a modest SUV that had been registered in her name. The Charlotte home, which Damon had helped design and held primary equity in, would be sold with proceeds distributed according to the original investment ratio. It was mathematics, not malice. Numbers on paper that told their own story. During the mandatory asset disclosure process, another layer emerged. Warren Cole's development firm had listed Lydia as a contracted interior design consultant on 3 Atlanta projects over the past 2 years. The income, never disclosed in their joint tax filings, created additional complications. "This strengthens our position further," Philip noted, reviewing the documentation. "Undisclosed income during marriage is a serious matter." Damon absorbed this information with the same steady gaze he brought to structural calculations. He made no comment about the revelation itself, only about its implications for the settlement terms. The professional consequences arrived like quiet tremors in the weeks that followed. A Charlotte developer named Marcus Chen, who had worked with Damon on several projects, asked about Warren Cole's firm during a casual lunch. "I heard some things," Marcus said carefully, "about their business practices." Damon didn't elaborate. He simply stated the documented facts: the undisclosed consulting arrangements, the property co-ownership, the timeline. Marcus drew his own conclusions. 2 weeks later, Warren's firm lost their anchor contract with Chen Development, a relationship worth millions in potential projects. Lydia's event planning business felt similar aftershocks. Charlotte's professional circles overlapped like Venn diagrams: real estate, corporate events, design. Word moved through these spaces like water finding its level. Within months of the divorce filing, her client roster had contracted significantly. She never accused Damon of sabotage because there was nothing to accuse. He had never spoken an untrue word about her. The truth had simply become known. Brenda's role in the aftermath was equally measured. She stayed in Charlotte for 2 days after the confrontation, but not in the family home. She took a hotel room and met Lydia for coffee on neutral ground. "I'm not taking sides," Brenda said clearly, stirring her coffee without looking up. "But your silence in that living room when I asked you how long, that was an answer too." "You're my sister," Lydia had started to say. "Yes," Brenda cut in, "which is why I drove 5 hours to hear the truth, and why I stayed to tell you this. What you did wasn't just to Damon. It was to everyone who trusted you. Don't ask me to help you rebuild that trust until you understand the difference." The divorce proceedings continued through their prescribed steps. Each meeting, each filing, each disclosure building toward an inevitable conclusion. Damon attended every session with the same careful attention he brought to site inspection, present, focused, and professionally detached. When the call finally came, Damon was at his kitchen table, the same spot where he had first noticed something off in Lydia's behavior all those months ago. Philip's voice carried the formal tone of completion. "It's done," he said simply. "The judge signed the final decree this morning. You will have the official copies by tomorrow." "Thank you," Damon replied, his voice steady. He set the phone down on the table's polished surface. The morning sun caught the grain of the wood. the same pattern he had studied so many times before, while reviewing calculations, while drinking coffee, while building a life he thought would last forever. He sat there for a long moment, letting the finality settle into the quiet space. Then, with the same deliberate movement that had carried him through every step of this process, he stood up and walked to his desk. There was work to be done. The autumn air carried a crisp edge as Damon Price stood on the family land in Guilford County, watching his breath form small clouds in the October morning light. 31 acres stretched before him, the trees wearing their fall colors like a promise kept. Jerome stood beside him, both men studying the preliminary site plans spread across the hood of Jerome's truck. "The foundation work can start next month," Damon said, tracing the outline of 4 modest homes with his finger. "We're keeping the old oak trees intact, building around them instead of through them." The past 14 months had rewritten everything except what mattered most. After selling the Charlotte house, a transaction that closed quickly and cleanly, Damon had found a smaller place closer to his office. 2 bedrooms, good natural light, and no memories in the walls. It suited him perfectly. His firm had noticed the quiet strength he'd shown through the divorce. 3 months after it was final, they'd offered him a senior position, overseeing structural integrity on their largest project. He'd accepted with the same careful consideration he brought to everything now. "These homes," Jerome said, studying the plans, "they're going to change lives." Damon nodded. The affordable housing project had started as a conversation between father and son 6 months earlier. The land had been in the family since 1962, and now a portion of it would help 4 families build their own foundations. Damon had committed both his professional expertise and personal capital to the project. It felt right in a way that went beyond engineering. Sunday dinners with Jerome had become sacred routine. Sometimes they talked about the development plans, sometimes about Jerome's garden. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, 2 men who understood that not everything needed words to be understood. His friendship with Audra had deepened into something neither of them had to work at. She'd stop by his office with coffee, or he'd help her troubleshoot a difficult client proposal, and it all happened without effort or expectation. The kind of friendship that wore its comfort like an old jacket. "Heard from Marcus Chen last week," Jerome said, adjusting his jacket against the morning chill. "Said Warren Cole's firm is down to local residential work now. Most of the big commercial clients moved on." Damon absorbed this information without reaction. He hadn't spoken to Lydia since that Saturday morning in his living room, and he had no plans to break that silence. But news traveled, especially in the Southeast's interconnected business circles. Warren had tried to salvage his marriage to Dana, a reconciliation that lasted barely 4 months before Dana filed for divorce anyway. His professional standing never recovered from the ripple effects of the truth becoming known. Lydia was still in Atlanta, but her event planning business had contracted to smaller corporate functions and private parties. The life she'd sacrificed everything for, the gleaming high-rise existence with Warren, had evaporated like morning dew. She was learning to live in a narrower world than the one she'd imagined for herself. "Foundation work looks solid," Jerome commented, tapping the engineering specifications. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair as he studied the documents with the same attention to detail he'd once brought to his postal route. Damon moved a stone with his foot, feeling the solid earth beneath it. This land had outlasted every storm, every season, every choice, just like the men who'd held it in trust. The 4 affordable homes would be built with the same care that had marked everything in his life now. Deliberate, precise, and aimed at something larger than himself. The preliminary site plan showed more than just building footprints and utility lines. It showed legacy reimagined. The Price family land would help other families build their own stories. It was, Damon realized, the most meaningful work he'd ever done. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, riding the morning thermals. Jerome watched it for a moment, then turned to his son with quiet pride in his eyes. Your grandfather would have liked you, he said simply. Damon looked out over the land, the old trees that would shelter new homes, the soil that had held his family's footsteps for 60 years, the future taking shape in careful measurements and considered plans. I fixed it, he said. He meant the land. He meant his life. He meant himself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.